Okay, so this is leading from the middle, leading out to lead in. I'm Stephen Colbert. We're here for the ACSA Middle Leadership Series. My special interests in the bottom left there are instructional video, flip learning, edu reading, and Teachers Across Borders Australia. I'm on Twitter, YouTube, and the interwebs there if you want to follow up. So I've got some AITSL standards here. I won't linger on them too much, and I don't actually expect you to read them, but just trust that we are engaging with one another and developing our professional knowledge and needs and things like that. So, keep that in mind. In short, what we're going to discuss today is we're going to start pretty theoretical. So I've done a fair bit of research into leadership as an educational framing. And so we'll talk about that first: career stages, roles, work, definitions, and metaphors. Then we'll talk to things that I think are worth doing. So discovering your pedagogical gift, acting local, thinking global, becoming research informed, finding your clients or your mentors, getting better, coaching and self-improvement, getting organized, and getting involved. So those are basically the things that we're going to be looking at doing today. In terms of protocol, so we're in Zoom. So one thing I'll need you to do is post messages, responses, and questions, or whatever you want to do, whatever you want to say in chat. If you want to try it now, go to select presenter and everyone, and then that means that everyone will be able to see it, not just me. And that's important because otherwise I'll be answering questions or responding to comments that only I can see, which makes me sound insane. And of course, jump in at any time. I'll pause anytime I'm getting you to respond to things, anytime that there's something on screen rather than reading it out. I will add that in. So obviously jump in at any point with questions, comments, whatever. The easy thing is that you've got a chat window, so you can do that quite freely without interrupting the flow. There'll be a couple of points where I'll be asking you to use an app to sort of engage so that we can see one another more easily. But you can also do that in chat if for whatever reason it doesn't work for you or for me, who knows. And I won't read things aloud, so if there's a text-heavy slide, I will pause and give you some time to actually read that, and just let me know if I'm not allowing enough time so we can sort of work that out together. First one, I like to talk about this a fair bit. 3 career stages, and keeping in mind I promised I wouldn't read this out. So what I want you to do is pause, read each of these stages, and try and think of which you are in. So keep in mind that they're not sort of hierarchical and they're not in order. So it's not like if you're a new career teacher, then you'll therefore be early career stage. It just depends on how you view your work. So I'll pause for a moment to let you do that. And then we're going to do our first activity. Okay, so what I want you to do is you go to that link, you enter that thing, and then you can choose between these 3 options, and it should update live as we watch it. So we're here talking about middle leadership, and my synthesis and summary before we jump into the particulars is that it's poorly researched. The people that I'll be quoting here obviously are excellent researchers, but poorly researched in the sense that not many people are out there doing it, and it's not nationally consistent or well documented. What that basically means is that there's a million different roles in Victoria, New South Wales, all over Australia that are different, and depending on the system, obviously if you're in independent school, rural, remote, there's all sorts of different lingo for different things, and that's not ideal. So as a result, I'm going to define things for us. So there's middle leaders and middle leadership, so the act and the thing. And then the most recent definition that I like is the one down the bottom, and so I'll pause for a moment so you can get a grasp of that. So that's my definition of what we're talking about. So these are formal middle leader roles, and again I'm going to pause, but this is from Dino Beale, and he provides these as sort of an example of what some of these might look like. So then, this is what it looks like in a Victorian school. So I'm not presuming any or all of you are from Victoria. So between principals and teachers, that's the important middle leadership part. You've got various different roles, and I'm the bottom of the yellow highlighted options. So these are the core conditions for success. So if we might actually pause there, in fact, and see what you think. Do you have principal support? Are you able to receive professional development and perhaps even deliver it? So I think that's really important as a leader to be able to do. Is there culture for leadership development and for improvement? Do you personally have enthusiasm and drive? And do you have knowledge? So to me, this might be, I don't know, a bit elitist sounding, but I personally think that leaders should have ideally more, but also different knowledge to people, so to their staff at least. So if I was a high school teacher and I went and learnt how to be a primary school teacher, that would give me significant advantage in my role as a secondary school teacher, because I would have that kind of progressional knowledge. Likewise, if I was to go and study the kinds of degrees, the types of degrees that I have studied, that, in my opinion, gives me different knowledge and therefore kind of, in some respects, warrants some form of leadership. Importantly, there's some affordances. So being between, as the kind of graphic before showed, being between principals and teachers, you kind of have empathy for both. So your average teacher won't have too much awareness of the work of a principal, but being able to be in middle leadership, you kind of get a little insight into both, and so you can have kind of empathy as well. And of course, understanding the site from within. So that's why, if it was up to me, these sort of middle leadership positions would probably go for a little bit more length of time, so that you have actual time to sort of learn the context and learn the way things move and the way things change over multiple years. It's not the sort of thing that you can sort of jump into a new school and do really easily. It takes a lot of sort of fact finding, I guess. So we're going to talk about the actual work. And basically, according to research, these researchers in particular, Scott Dinham being one of the stars of them, you're influencing others via vision sharing, direction setting, and motivating. So those are all very ephemeral things and quite difficult to achieve, I guess. So at this point, I just want you to sort of class or classify yourself into one of these groups, and then we might discuss from there. Importantly, there's three kinds of leadership work: management, leadership, and transformational leadership. Don't imagine I'm giving you too much information that you're not familiar with already. But what I want you to do is sort of plot the type of work that you do in your role along these kind of axes. So personally, I would put myself somewhere between leadership, transformational. I don't have to do much management at all. When I was sort of rolling out continuous reporting, that was more of a management task. So I sort of enjoyed the kind of physicality of that, in the sense that, you've changed a process in a digital way, and it would kind of forever maintain its sort of direction in that regard. Whereas transformational leadership and leadership more generally is a lot more kind of ephemeral, let's say. I really love this metaphor from Christine Grease. She refers to middle leadership as spy surveillance and pedagogical middle leadership. So sort of like being a spy. So you're not a teacher and you're not a principal. Well, in many respects, you're parts of both, but that you're kind of a spy between the two groups. So I think this is really useful and important, because one thing you need to consider as well is that you want to keep confidentiality together when you're doing this. So if you're communicating to leadership things that are happening in the teaching kind of facility, then you try and avoid names and being too specific in a way that could be traced back. And obviously a lot of that for me comes from sort of union training, where you say, well, a member of the sub-branch said, rather than naming people. Just find that really useful. 7 strong claims about leadership we're going to go through. If you want to type your thoughts and ideas as these come through, again, I'll pause and give you time to process these, but these are our 7. So what I want, for sort of free expression, what do middle leaders make? And we might be able to kind of riff on from these kind of topics going forward. I really like this idea from Barnett Berry. Teacherpreneur. So the kind of, especially as an Australian, I guess it kind of makes us feel quite, it sounds a little bit tall poppy-ish and a little bit uncomfortable, the actual phrasing, but he described these 4 things that we'll go through in detail. So I really, really, really like this idea. It's probably the closest definition I've been able to find to the sort of things that I end up doing. But obviously I would never call myself this phrase for the kind of Australian cultural factors that are pretty obvious to us. One thing that I think is very important is to find your pedagogical gift. So there's this beautiful book, Energizing Teaching, the Power of Your Unique Pedagogical Gifts. So it's kind of reframing the work of teachers from sort of like a Hattieist perspective of kind of, pedagogical rigor and based on research, but rather as sort of something that, like a dancer or a sports person or a kind of something that normally people would refer to as a talent, rather than teaching, which is kind of referred to either as kind of a an art or a science. And somewhere in the middle, I think, is the kind of the idea of talent, gifts. Teachers are more than just a label. It's kind of something that we actively do. So for me, that's instructional video. So the Flip Learning Global Initiative course is the level 1 course to learn what flip learning is, and I'm an expert on there. I've just finished filming a whole series with ClickView around similar topics, and in the right hand side, that's a Monash University MOOC that's free, online teaching interactivity, and I've got a couple of examples up there made by Matt Fifield and another academic. They're both very, very strong in their expertise. So this is what instructional video looks like in my site. That's light board, green screen, swivels, podcasting, all that sort of equipment there. Top right hand corner, that's our students being differentiated by our maths team that do an excellent job of kind of differentiating using video. So students aren't stuck at the kind of 100% of the classes at this point, but they can instead differentiate using instructional video. I'm going to show you a little video here that I will skip for now, but this is our tour of A9, the room that we built for the purpose of instructional video. So just in terms of your pedagogical gifts, one element of that I think is knowing your stuff and being the thing that you teach. So these 4 people, Pete Whiting, Science Steve, as he's known, because he teaches science, Courtney Crawford and Shortima Rakowski, all to me 4 shining examples of teachers that are what they teach. So if you speak to these people, it's like they embody their subject matter rather than merely being a teacher, as I find myself too often being. So that's something that I strive to be, kind of, even from the way that I communicate, you can tell the subject that I teach or the thing that I'm engaged in educating people around. So importantly, find your mentors, and kind of, to me, this is absolutely key. Liz Benson last week referred to it as her board of directors. My general phrase, if you want to be an eagle, you don't fly with pigeons. So these are kind of the people that I idolize, and I sort of take a lot of inspiration from. So I've got Yelma Evers from somewhere, Yeso, Scott Ecott, Jane Caro, Barnett Berry, Deb Nedelicki, Radhika Gurur, and Ahmad Doucette. So these people are sort of, in many respects, the best in their field in the things that I'm interested in. And I think it's really important to exploit expertise and cultivate mentors. So these don't necessarily have to be people that you engage with regularly, but if they're producing content that you can engage with, then that in and of itself is a pretty good sign that they're people that you can look up to and aim to be like, and whatever. And obviously, as you become more known in the world for whatever your pedagogical gift is, you might get to engage with some of the people that you idolize and that you have mentors for. Coaching, a big thing to sort of really get excited and to change your practice. I've got leadership coaching there, learning to be a coach, counseling and therapy. So most people would think of sort of getting better and professional learning as sort of like something that you do in a conference room. Well, perhaps not anymore, something that you do on a webinar, let's say. But to me, anything that's improving you as a person and the way that you respond to things and the way that you learn and engage with the world and understand things is super useful. So these are a couple of coaching organizations that I'm personally involved with, and 2 really good books. My coaching experience was basically, I'd sort of learnt of the concept of coaching, and within, I think, a week of learning of that, I'd spoken to Jim Knight and Chris Munro, who to me, and this is my limited understanding of coaching, are sort of 2 of the sort of big names. Chris Munro in Australia and Jim Knight over in the States are kind of the big names. So I was sort of stumbled into that quite well, I think. So something I think we should all do is get organized. I think the more organized we could be, the better. Something I found super useful is in Outlook, you can set up quick steps, as it says up the top, and just sort of to sort your email. So my inbox usually can get, it says 50 there, but often it can get down to 0 because I'm dealing with things in particular categories. So I've got, depending on what it is, there's school stuff, there's correspondence, formal speaking, conferences, EI, student work, all those sort of things. So everything goes into a folder that then means that it's not lost and that it can be dealt with sort of when I'm in that particular frame of mind. So I won't just kind of go through emails willy-nilly. I'll quickly sort them, and then it might be like, okay, well, I'm sitting down to mark student work, so I will open that folder and go from there. And then it's really important, it's easy when you have a full timetable and you're just teaching your guts out. Your timetable is your timetable, but when you're sort of in middle leadership, it becomes a lot more flexible. So you can see, like, say, I don't know, on the Friday, that looks like a full day, but say Wednesday is a day that I don't have any scheduled classes. So these are all assisting particular students or meeting with particular people. So to me, that's really useful. I actually have an Outlook and a Google Calendar. Probably one day I'll work on having them all be in the same place, but until Microsoft and Google become friends, perhaps that's not possible. So these are ways for you to get involved in person and online, and I'll sort of talk you through the history of how these came to be. All right, so Teach Me, what is that? So, short presentations, open to all participants, free from commercial interests, everyone has an equal voice, run by a democratic collective, form of distributed leadership. So, cool. Basically, these are all the in-person ones that we did, one in Brisbane, the rest in various places in Melbourne, at conferences at different people's schools, and at ACU at different around different themes. So people turn up with a particular interest and they share short 2, 3, 5, 7 or 8 minute presentations depending on how you set it up. And then all of a sudden, of course, we had to jump online. So these are 2 articles I've had published on the concept. It all started with Aussie Ed, which is the Twitter, sort of the godfathers of Australian education on Twitter, Aussie Ed, of which I'm part of the team. Basically, bushfires happened and we decided that we needed to sort of do something, and so we put on a fundraiser with Dylan Williams, John Bergman, Yasso, Eddie Wu was involved, Tara Martin, which people you may or may not be aware of, but kind of big names in education, and we raised around about $3,000 from memory to go directly to the school that was burnt down by an arson attack, and we did that through Deadly Science, which is Corey Tutt, who was New South Wales Australian of the Year this year. And so kind of through his charity, we supported that school by providing resources and so forth. Then Teach Me, one thing was Matt Esterman in New South Wales put on the first online Teach Me and sort of made the connection between what we'd done with the fire fundraiser and then the actual Teach Me. So since then, me personally has run 4 in collaboration with the various different people. If you've got a particular topic that you're really keen to explore, hit me up and we'll talk about organising one. I sort of do all the tech side. You find people that you think are good to speak on the topic, and then that's how it works. The next one coming up is August 12th, so next week. And all our speakers are lined up, and it's kind of time for people to sign up to attend. So if you'd like to do that, you go to this website, fill in a Google form in a couple of minutes, and then I'll email you the kind of details of when it is and when it happens. This is really important to me, I think, but it could be maybe unreasonable for many of us, but I think it's really important to be globally minded. So one of the ways that I've gone about doing that is a tiny bit involved in Education International, which is the Global Union Federation of Teachers Trade Unions. They represent 401 organizations, 72 countries, and 35 million teachers total. It's kind of like, I describe it to people as the United Nations of unions. And they communicate similarly to the UN in English, Spanish, and French. And so that means a lot of sort of headphone in the ear translation happening, which is a unique experience if you've never done a webinar across multiple languages via translation. So I'm involved over there with the Future of Work in Education Reference Committee, and they published this blog of mine on their blog, which was then translated into French and Spanish, which is probably the coolest thing that's ever happened to anything I've written. So that's just there for that. Teachers Across Borders Australia. So this is my wife and I in Cambodia. Haven't been there for a little while, as you might imagine, but this is something that I've been doing for the last 5 years, and since then I'm now the secretary and my wife is the president of the organisation, and our former president recently won an Order of Australia medal. So that's kind of the type of amazing work that's happened over the last 13 years for this organisation, and now we're very excited to sort of take it over. if in theory you want to help out, search out Teachers Across Borders Australia and hit us up. We're trying to work out a webinar format to replace what we used to do face-to-face in the current situation. One thing you need to do is work out where your work and your thinking, your ideas fit. So to do that, you will need to engage with the research base. I'm just going to show you a whole bunch of books that I'm absolutely in love with. All of these are heavily daubed in my handwriting and are referred to regularly. And what I want to ask you is, what leadership books have you enjoyed? And there's a pretty good chance I'm going to go read them after this presentation. I'll go back to this slide and steal your ideas. But if you want to just chip those in, that would be amazing. And then another way to engage with research is something that I run called edu reading. So each month we read an academic article and we talk about it. Simple as that. We use Flipgrid. If you've ever used Flipgrid with your students, we use it in a professional sense. So these are the people in the group as of now. There's one that's joined just yesterday morning to add to that list. But basically we share short videos around the theme. So this month's article is Training the Brain or Tending a Garden. Do students' metaphors for learning predict self-reported learning patterns? So basically, if one student has a concept that learning is, like rowing a boat, does that mean they will do better than students who perceive learning to be something like discovering a mystery or improving themselves or something? That's what the article's about. It's open to the whole world, and it's done asynchronously. So Flipgrid can be posted at any time in any time zone. So we typically get people from the US, the UK, and France joining our discussion, as well as a whole bunch of Australian people. So if that's the sort of kink that you're into, let me know. It's also spawned 2 spin-offs, so IU Reading for the Independent Education Union and L&D Reads, which is about for a group for learning designers, which is teachers sort of in corporate settings, and they did their own article as well with a woman named Michelle Ockers, who you can look up on LinkedIn and sort of hook up with if you really like that idea. So the very short section, as you might imagine, is about me leading in. So basically, as of the last 2 years, I've been involved in Victoria, we call the Mylands group, which is basically helping students who scored very low on literacy or numeracy for their NAPLAN test. And 2 years ago now, I brought in continuous reporting at my school. So that was quite the sort of managerial part of leading that I talked about that I quite enjoyed. Something I think you should do is get involved with your union, what I refer to as drinking from the poison chalice. That's often what people referred to it before I was in the role, let's say, that, becoming the union anything at a school would mean drinking from a poison chalice. I personally think it can be done well and without, sacrificing your leadership aspirations, let's say. So I'm sub-branch president at my school, vice president of our region. I'm on a group called Education Committee, and I'm the branch counsellor for our Northwest region, which is sort of bigger than the region just described. So, this is the kind of work that we do. Education Committee is really exciting. We write policy for the union, so we can be a little bit on the front foot rather than responding simply to kind of the news of the day and the new ideas coming out of government. As a result of sort of the union stuff that I've been involved with, I'm on the practitioners reference group for the NAPLAN review, which should be coming out pretty soon as far as I'm led to believe. So there should be a kind of a report coming out about what should be done with NAPLAN going forward that we had a small say in contributing to, and kind of got to meet all the academics involved in the process. I was on national radio speaking with Sue Thompson, who's the kind of Deputy Chief Exec, as it says there, of ACSA, and Mark Scott, who's sort of the Secretary for Education in New South Wales, talking about PISA results, the fact that we're falling behind, as we forever are, in PISA. And then most recently, got to join these clever people. The thing that makes me laugh the most is Professor, Associate Professor, Professor, Mr. We were talking about creating the new normal for a Monash University event that had about 3,000 people show up. So these are all kind of things that resulted from kind of being involved with the union and practicing speaking about things that actually relate to schools, kind of policy level rather than classroom level or anything like that. What I'm going to talk to you really briefly is sort of leading and collaborating online with EduTweetOz and Aussie Ed. So if you're not familiar with Twitter, maybe let me know and we'll sort of slow it down or speed it up. But running a Twitter chat Sunday nights on Aussie Ed. We talk about a whole bunch of different topics. These are the particular ones that I happen to have led, a little while ago. EduTweet Oz, I won't play this video for you, but it's basically a large following account that people take on for 1 week at a time. So if you're new to Twitter, it's sort of the way to kind of get a real signal boost and move from, say, 0 followers to, I think it's around 28,000. So for a week, you kind of get to engage with a wider audience and sort of, get people aware of what you're on about. And so that's something that I now help to sort of facilitate. So if you want to get involved with that, hit me up. Might be worth pursuing Tech Accreditation. I found that useful earlier in my career, less so now, but sort of to network with teachers and to find kind of your EdTech kind of gurus in your field and sort of to see how other schools are doing things. If you're tech inclined, this will be really useful for that sort of stuff. If not, might be good PD. If you're not interested in technology at all, it's probably going to be a little bit difficult to find leadership positions, to be honest, because that's invariably a large factor in that, to be completely honest. One thing, so obviously I would hope that we're all kind of members of our associations, but now that you're looking to sort of move out into the world and lead or be influential or something like that, it's time to actually get involved with working groups or boards of these organizations. So, you might have that, dusty old card sitting in the back of your wallet for one of these groups, but now you should actually take that step out and try and get involved, ideally with a sort of state-based, but even better, a national organization, and kind of try and share something at that level. There's a whole bunch of stuff I could talk about blogging, vlogging, teach meets. We've already covered podcasting, conferences, speaking at conferences, and writing kind of practitioner-based sort of stuff, and also academic writing. But I'll leave that for Marco Cimino, which is 2 weeks from now, I believe. Though Ruth will probably correct me at the end. And then if you're leading beyond your school, the only thing I would say is avoid this one phrase, at my school. So anytime I'm at a forum at a state or national or international level, this is the one thing that will get you on the wrong side of those sort of groups. So if you're ever in that situation, just as much as possible, think to yourself and try and avoid that one phrase. It's my personal belief that if you're a teacher, you are a leader. If you think of the things that you do with your class every day, kind of, helping the students that are behind, extending the ones that are, ahead, let's say, or in the lead, or however you want to phrase it competitively, that's what leadership is. So I think all teachers are natural leaders. And so it's not a big step if you're based only in the classroom to then apply the same skills, knowledge, and expertise that you do in your class to professional development and to leadership of your colleagues. And thus ends my presentation. So if you've got any questions, hit me up here. Otherwise, I'll hang around for a couple of minutes. And thus ends my presentation. Here are some references if you really want to dig in a little bit deeper. There's probably heaps more that I mentioned in books that you could look up, but probably just easier to hit me up if that is the case, and I'll sort of pass them on. So yeah, thank you very much.